Hi, I'm Julie Mueller, Associate Professor of Social Science at Southern Maine Community College. Thank you for joining me for part one of the American Political Science Association's two-part webinar. This series features 3 video presentations showcasing community college faculty's approaches to online political science education. In this second video, I'm going to discuss 3 teaching resources for international relations. Please be sure to watch my other 2 colleagues' videos before joining us for our live webinar in January 2021. The 3 assignments I'm going to talk about are first one that is an individual assignment about Syria using chemical weapons against its own citizens. The second assignment is a group discussion about cyber warfare. And the third assignment is a longer group project that involves a trade negotiation. You can find all of the assignment details on APSA's Educate website under Resources. This first assignment is an individual written assignment that I use to help explain one particular issue in international relations, and I use it at the beginning of the semester to help give my students a picture of how complicated IR really can be. I use short videos and some articles to help them answer the assignment questions. The purpose of the assignment is to expose them to one specific issue, and that was Syria's use of chemical weapons. But they used them multiple times under different US presidents, and so there were 2 different responses. It helps students start to think about the complexity of decision-making in the international context, because President Obama had to take into consideration the views of Congress and the views of our allies like Great Britain, who both opposed a military response. It also helps them examine the domestic and international factors that can affect decision-making, and look at how different leadership styles and different approaches to international relations, different theoretical approaches, can lead to very different outcomes. This assignment can be used early in the semester, as I said, to talk about the complexities of international relations, or you can use it later in the semester when you talk about state-level decision-making. So I gave the students several short videos. First, they watched some videos about Obama's decision-making process when he drew the red line against using chemical weapons, and then his refusal to respond militarily. And then after they answer some questions about that, they watch a video about Donald Trump's response to a similar chemical attack. I also give them some articles for some background reading on the US involvement in Syria prior to this. The way I have it structured, students answer questions, short paragraphs in a written individual assignment. But there's other ways you could set this assignment up. You could have students make a video response. You could use it as a prompt for a discussion board, because it really is a little controversial whether or not Obama made the right decision at the time. So you could also use this for a structured debate in class. Should Obama have responded militarily? Now keep in mind that Russia then stepped up to the plate and brokered an agreement with Syria to get rid of their chemical weapons. And so it really did in the end make America look fairly weak. Some of the benefits of this assignment are that it's a fairly short assignment. It's an issue that students can pretty easily understand. Using chemical weapons, wrong. It does, however, demonstrate the complexity of making decisions. Even if Obama wanted to respond, he had a lot of restrictions. And it also provides a reference for later class discussions. I find that students bring this issue up later in the semester, and it's a good learning experience for them. The second assignment I want to talk about is a group discussion that I hold via a Google Doc rather than using my LMS discussion board. This is a technique that I picked up from the Institute for the Study of Diplomacy at Georgetown, and how they do recommend using case studies for discussion in online classes. And I think it works pretty well, partly because my LMS that my school is using at the moment doesn't allow me to restrict students from creating additional threads, and I want them all to talk on the same thread. So the purpose of this assignment is to delve into an evolving or new area of security concerns and to consider some of the ethical issues involved in even defining what constitutes a cyber attack. And so I use this as a way for them to apply the just war doctrine. We also look at how traditional definitions of security need to be revised or updated as new technologies emerge. And I have them consider the benefits and limitations of crafting a new treaty around this particular issue area. So some of the background that students will need to complete this assignment, one is a discussion or reading about the just war doctrine. And another is some information about different approaches to defining when a cyber attack constitutes an act of war. The textbook that I use talks about these 3 different approaches, and I think this is a good way for students to think about it: the instrument-based approach, the effects-based approach, and the target-based approach. But you could set this up differently if you cover this issue differently in your class. I give them some discussion questions and I post them on a Google Doc. There's an example in APSA's Educate resources that ask them to first decide as a group what types of activities are going to be classified as a cyber attack, why preventing cyber attacks is difficult, and then some of the things they might want to include in an international treaty, or some of the limitations to crafting an international treaty. So they have assigned readings and lectures to do before they take part in the discussion. And then the group discusses on a Google Doc. This works really well if you have a synchronous class and you can do this during class time. They can all be on the Google Docs at the same time and you can hop from doc to doc and check their discussion. Or if you have a hybrid class, you could do that. But I've also used it in an asynchronous class, and I gave the groups the choice of either picking a time that they could all be on the doc together for like an hour, hour and a half to hold their discussion, or most of the groups couldn't do that because people are in different time zones, and so they just did it asynchronously like they've done other discussions. But you might want to remind them to go on the discussion multiple times to participate. I do have them use a different color and their initials to indicate when they're talking on the document so I can keep track of who's talking. Some of the benefits of this assignment are that students get to grapple with a totally new area that's emerging in international relations, and that's kind of interesting and exciting for them. And it's also a good way to help create classroom community when you have them working in groups. So you could do this earlier in the semester. I tend to do it later when we're talking about the issue of war and security. All right, the last assignment is the most complex of the 3. This is an assignment that I've done in my face-to-face classes, and it's been really successful. And it's certainly a lot easier to do there. But I've tried to figure out a way to do this in my online classes, and I did this in an online asynchronous class. It would be a lot easier in a synchronous class, but you could do it either way. So in this assignment, the students are assigned to different groups, and they are 3 different countries, country A, B, and C, which roughly correspond to the United States, China, and some developing country like the Congo. And they are attempting to create a trade agreement around the issue of cell phones. And so I give them a short list of the description of each country. It's pretty basic. And ask them to sort of play the role of the trade negotiators for each country. Here's what I hope students will get out of this assignment. I want them to come away with an understanding that negotiations are complex and that negotiating with one country may be impacted by your negotiations with a 3rd country or 4th country or 5th country. I also want them to know that there's different types of power in international relations, and that just because a country is a poor developing country doesn't mean they don't have power. In this particular assignment, the country C has a rare element that they mine there that is necessary for creating cell phones. I also want them to know that factors unrelated to trade may impact the negotiations. So I give them a little bit of information about the country's militaries and also about human rights. And those also play a factor in the negotiations. And I want them to know that the structure of negotiations makes a difference. Now, obviously, this is going to be a severely limited structure compared to actual trade negotiations. But still, the limitations are important. Sometimes it's hard for them to get together and meet. Sometimes the group members don't show up or do their job. So I want them to realize that the structure makes a difference. And also they usually come away with the knowledge that bombing another country is probably unrealistic in trade negotiations. All right, so here's how I structure this assignment. The students are assigned to a country, and each student is given a specific role within that country. And I thought this would be helpful for students to have specific roles so that they know exactly what they are supposed to be taking care of during this particular group project. I made this a 2-week assignment. You might want to make it longer. But during week 1, they were supposed to negotiate within their country about their negotiating strategy. What did they want from the other 2 countries, and what were they willing to give the other 2 countries? I set up a discussion board, an ungraded discussion board in the class LMS for them to have their domestic country discussions, but I told them it was fine for them to set up a different way to do that. So some countries set up Google Docs. Some countries just did it by text. As long as I could see who was doing what, so they would send me screenshots of the text afterwards so I could grade them on it. So then week 2 of the assignment, they had to conduct the negotiations with the other 2 countries. And for this, I set up a Google Doc for each negotiation. So one for country A and B, one for A and C, and one for B and C. And only the students in those countries could see that Google Doc. So country C couldn't see what A and B were talking about in their Google Doc. Now again, I told them they were welcome to set up a different way to do the negotiations if they wanted to. I don't think anyone did. And then what they need to turn in for this assignment is an assessment of how things went. There's some questions in the assignment for them to write answers to, such as what was their trade strategy, what were they asking for, what did they get? And I make it very clear that it's totally fine if they don't complete a trade agreement during this restricted time period. All right, so some of the benefits of this assignment are certainly it, again, helps create classroom community, but also students seem to enjoy the role-playing aspect of this. It oversimplifies the issue of a trade negotiation, of course, but it still gives them some good insights into how complicated the process can actually be. It also helps them apply some of the economic theories that they're learning. And they can see as they start to craft a strategy that they maybe fall into a mercantilist or liberal viewpoint. So those were my 3 assignments for IR. Thank you for watching video number 2 for the American Political Science Association's webinar. Be sure to watch the other 2 videos. We look forward to seeing you during our webinar's second event this coming January.